chairman of the board. Am I right?
Chairman of the board, and I will explain kind of the difference. This is our year of transition at NSA, and I'll be happy to explain that.
Great. Barry is a longtime NSA member, and I've been to his workshops. He's the first workshop I sign up for because he's always got a new idea. And we're doing a format today. Instead of a presentation, we're going to do a Larry King Live. So you probably remember Larry, you remember Larry, or Barry, you remember Larry, I'm sure.
Well, I just sent a message to Bill before let me look on the screen. Almost before anybody on this screen was born, I ran a chain of radio stations across America, including Miami. And I knew Larry King back before he was Larry King. So yes.
Oh my gosh. Great. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Then I'm going to ask the audience to ask you some questions, and we're going to go that way, if that's okay with you.
Perfect. And let me just say thank you very much for the privilege as both chairman of the board of NSA, but more importantly, as a colleague. Thank you for letting me spend this time with you on your Saturday.
That's great. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. This is a great group of people in our Speakers Academy, and we're learning a ton. So even the two deans are learning a ton. Connor is the dean. I am the co-dean of all this. So Barry, here's the question I'd like to start with. Can you tell us about your business model before the end of February? What was going on in your head in the beginning of March, and what's your business model now?
Thank you. Great question. Powerful question. Let me go back a couple of decades. When I began full-time as a speaker in 1994, I was the chairman of the State Board of Colleges and doing other things before that where I was speaking. But when I dedicated myself to it in 1994, I remember I had a keynote in London for Rockwell Collins, a Fortune 50 company. And my son at the time, who was 10, had a Little League Baseball championship game on Tuesday evening at 4. I left Tampa early on a Sunday morning, got to Atlanta, took the overnight flight to Gatwick in London, got there about daylight, got to the hotel, took a shower, went downstairs, did my keynote, got back to Gatwick, got on an overnight flight to Atlanta, an afternoon flight from Atlanta to Tampa. And at 4:30, 30 minutes late, I sat down on the bench next to my wife. And she leaned over and said, "When the boys go to bed, we need to talk." Now, I think most men would agree when you hear those wonderful words, "we need to talk." I know a couple of things. It has nothing to do with dinner in a fine restaurant, and I'm not going to be doing any talking. I'm going to be listening. She said, we can't do this. You can't raise the boys and travel 3 or 4 days a week. So in 1994, I began to develop what we call regional clients, where I could work with them during the day, or maybe we go on one night, but not 3 or 4. So my business model from 1994 until 2020 has been both speaking as the platform. I speak at an association or gathering of business owners. And after I speak to an audience of 500, 5 or 6 will line up and say, "I think you can help us with our C-suite, with our family generational transition, et cetera." And 2 or 3 of those become consulting contracts. We're very fortunate. Our longest current family business contract, we're in our 24th year. Most of our clients have been with us 10 to 15 years. I'll be in Atlanta on Monday for the 152nd or 3rd presentation I've done for business there every month for 15 years. That's been the model. Now, when COVID hit, our clients by that time were primarily West Central Florida, Tampa, Orlando, Sarasota, Metro Atlanta, which is an easy up and back, and then Hartford, Connecticut. I won't go into why Hartford, it's just that we had a cluster of clients there. So those 3 markets I could get in and out of pretty easily. Now, obviously, I've got to speak in Vegas or Orlando or Chicago to a conference. But for the consulting, coaching, and training business, it's those 3 markets. So my clients in Connecticut, come March 1st, I couldn't get in there to meet with them or speak to their leadership groups. So we went to Zoom, doing it on Zoom. And I probably was 2 months into that when one of those clients said, "I love this." Now, let me explain why. Because I would be in Connecticut 1 or 2 days a month, max. And the client knew I'd be meeting with them and speaking for them. When we went to this format, they wanted to talk every day. So the workload with those consulting and coaching clients has picked up because this makes it much more immediate. Now, I have another large publicly owned medical manufacturer. I keynoted their conference in Phoenix in January, and they immediately asked me to do 2 more. COVID hits. The VP says, "Barry, we're going to have to postpone it." And I said, "Well, but those leaders still need what we were working on." He said, "Yeah, but I can't put 500 leaders on a Zoom call." I said, well, let's try something. Let's try putting them on 50 at a time. We'll do 10 of them for an hour, and they'll be very interactive. And it took me a day and a half, but it would have taken me 2 days to travel and get there for the keynote. And to my surprise, and I think to the company's surprise, that really worked well. So he recently said to me, as soon as we can meet again, you're going to keynote for us, but we want to keep up these smaller gatherings. So prior to COVID, I was consulting, coaching, training, built on speaking. Now in COVID, I've done some virtual association big meetings, but really the sweet spot I found is about 30 to 40 leaders on the screen, and we're there for 90 minutes. And I've created a very interactive model with them that has both a pre-virtual component, and then very interactive when we're in the middle of it, and then a post-virtual component. And I'll end it with just this one last thing. For example, I did a program on Friday for Mosaic. You may know Mosaic, the big fertilizer company worldwide. And I had their leaders on, and they wanted to talk about what kind of leadership do they need right now. So I began with the question, what do you think is the most important leadership quality that your company needs right now? And everybody participated. It took about 30 minutes for everybody to say. They came up with 17 principles of leadership. Now, none of those surprised me, but they were theirs. I didn't tell them. They told me. I commented briefly between each one. Now, starting a week from Monday, for 17 weeks in a row, I'll be sending out a e-zine or an email to all those participants for 17 weeks, and I'll take each one of their topics and I'll go a lot deeper. So the model during COVID I've found is smaller groups, more participatory with lots of in-depth follow-up. So that's where I am right now.
Okay. When you first started, were you successful when you first started? I mean, did this just kind of happen for you, or did you have to build this business a long time ago?
So I'll share that story. I began speaking in high school, and I had a chain of radio stations across the country. I was in broadcasting from about 15 years of age to 25 as an on-air person. Then I began to get into ownership and running them. But I was always speaking, and I was speaking for a fee before I began what we now would call our business. At the time, I'd served in the administration of 3 Florida governors as their appointee to oversee all private higher education. I was responsible for about 500,000 students in 106 colleges. I was elected 3 terms as chairman of the state board. In that setting, I'm speaking all the time in cities across Florida to graduations, universities, university board meetings, community business groups. However, and I won't name the company, but in 1992, a very well-known worldwide training company asked me to help them develop a leadership course. They had a new book coming out on leadership, and they said, we've got Boeing and Rockwell Collins, 2 big, large companies. They want this program, but we don't have a training course. Now, I had taught management in college, and I had developed a lot of tools. I said, sure, I can do it. And the goal was I would write the course, and then they would bring 50 of their trainers from around the world to Tampa. I would teach them for 2 days how to teach it, and I'm finished. Well, we got down to the end, and Rockwell Collins said, look, we don't have time for you to train other people. We need it now. So the president of that company said, Barry, will you come and will you just deliver it yourself? We'll put our trainers in another hotel ballroom. By video, they can watch you deliver this leadership course to the CEO, the chairman, the C-suite of this Fortune 50 company. I agreed to do it. When I finished, the president of the company stood up and said, we want this course, which delighted my client, the company I'd written the program for. And then he looked at me and he said, but we've got one requirement. He's got to come with it. And I said, well, we'll talk about that. So the training company and I talked about it, and we worked it out. We worked it out to where I would do that. So for a year, in addition to other things I was doing, I would go to different parts of the world to deliver this program. I was back in I won't mention the city, but I was in the city where this company's headquartered. And the president said, can we have lunch in between your training sessions? I said, sure. So we're having lunch. This is 1993. And he said to me, he said, you probably have no idea what I pay for you to deliver this program. I'm paying your client, your client's paying you. He said, I just want you to know. And he said, I'm sticking my nose where it doesn't belong. But he said, if you ever decide to open up your own business, we're your first client. I thought about it for about 3 months, and I ended my contract with the training company. I called him, and when I opened the door in 1994, I had a contract for 2 years to develop leadership programs, deliver those programs. So for me, I was very blessed when I started to have that platform. Now, having said that, I would say to all of you, the most important thing The most important thing is to know what your cognitive competency is. What do you know, or what do you know how to do that other people will pay for? And if we have time, I'll be happy to use one of you as a role play, and I'll model how you can determine that. It's not your topic. So knowing what do you know, or what do you know how to do that other people will pay for? That's what you discover first. Then you find a way to be able to expose that to other people. And I've worked with a lot of people in our academy in NSA Central Florida, where we've been able to help them find speaking engagements, sometimes for free, where they're up in front of people who are decision makers. They can make the decision to buy you as a speaker, or buy you as a coach, or buy you as a trainer, or buy you as somebody who produces intellectual product, whatever that competency is. So I was blessed when I started to have a contract day one, but you can start without any contract and you can quickly get the exposure you need. Now, it's difficult right now. It's probably going to be summer before those kinds of opportunities come back. But Kevin, that's been my experience.
So it sounds like you say yes a lot.
Pardon?
It sounds like when you were building your business, even today, you say yes a lot when people
Yes.
come to you with that. So let me ask the students in the academy who would like to do the cognitive competency thing with Barry.
Okay, Amy, it's you. So take your mic off mute. Amy, I promise this is painless. I just have a few questions to ask you. Amy, tell me, what is your topic you speak on?
Leadership.
How do you mean that? When you say leadership, what do you mean?
Leadership, in the new definition, traditional leadership is leading from the top. And someone would say, with authority, say, go, and everyone's asking how high, how far. And what I want to bring to the marketplace is a different kind of leadership, which is more about collaborative, so that the group can be more innovative.
Amy, can you give me an example of that? When you say collaborative and innovative, give me an example of what you mean.
So in the past, leader would just say we need to be innovative and everyone has to find ways to do it. What my approach is that get the group together and in a way, like what you're saying is that facility innovative, and let the group come up with the answer and then find ways to make it happen.
So Amy, with great respect, is that really valuable to an organization to do that? What have you seen is the value of doing that?
Organizations all say that they want to be innovative these days, but they are not providing the kind of leadership that is necessary.
But does that pay off? If they become more innovative, does it really make a difference in the bottom line?
If they want to keep being ahead of the industry.
Stop right there. We just heard her core cognitive competency. She started with leadership. Now we know what it is. I speak on collaborative leadership to create the innovation to stay ahead of your industry. Get it? Nobody woke up this morning looking for a speaker. Nobody rolled over and said, gosh, I need to hire a speaker. A lot of people rolled over and said, I got to get ahead of my competition. I got to get to the top of my industry. And Amy, leadership is your topic, and I'm going to go back and show you how we got there. But your cognitive competency is you help leaders collaborate in an innovative way so they can get ahead of the industry. Now you're going to get the attention of a CEO or a meeting planner because that's bottom line. If I get ahead by my team collaborating and being innovative, we're making more money. Do you see how we got there?
Nice.
Now let me walk everybody just write these questions down and you can do this for yourself. Question number one, what's your topic? Then you ask yourself question number two, how do you mean that? Then you ask yourself question number three, can you give me an example? And then question number four, why is that valuable to a company? Why would they want to do that, or an association want to do that? Now, you don't go to the fourth question first or you'll have a false answer. You've got to walk through all four. And you can do this together as a speaker school exercise. When you walk your colleague through all four, when you get to that fourth question, it's going to come out what the cognitive competency is. Now, Amy, you can still market yourself as a leadership speaker, but when you're talking to a meeting planner or a corporate decision maker, you can look at them and say, let me show you how you could turn that into a sales strategy. Share with me, Ms. CEO, tell me about the last time your leaders collaborated and came up with an innovative idea. And more than likely, she's going to say, oh, I wish I could get them to do that. I'm reeling that fish in. She's just told me what they can't do, and I'm about to tell her that's what I do. I can show you how to create collaborative leadership that is innovative, that gets you ahead of your industry. What would that mean to you, Ms. CEO, Mr. CEO? What would it mean if you could do that? So 4 questions, topic. How do you mean that? Can you give me an example? Why is that valuable? And walk through those 4, and you'll be at what I consider your cognitive competency, what it is people will hire you for.
Now, do we have to say it with a Southern accent that says, how do you mean that?
So I've done a good bit of work in Europe, and I really have to work on it. I went to school in Andover, Massachusetts, and I'm from the mountains of North Carolina. I grew up in a sawmill family. I was raised in a 4-room house, the only member of my family to go to college. And it always takes me about 20 minutes with an audience for them to become convinced I really don't work on a turnip truck. I really do have something to offer to them, because I have to get past that, stereotype of who we all are.
Well, I love the thing where you said it's painless with respect. I think that was a really important thing to help get her to give you the answers you needed at that point. I mean, it was very, very, very engaging. It wasn't the questions only, right? It was the way you asked the question.
Right, exactly.
Barry, when you were a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I did grow up in a 4-room house next to a family sawmill. When you go to Google Appalachian sawmill family, and that's us. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. I slept in a double bed. We didn't have queen beds. I slept in a double bed with myself and 3 other people. As my aunt aged out and left home, and there were only 3 of us in that bed, I thought, if everybody ahead of me leaves, I'll have a bed to myself. And lo and behold, my parents started over, and here came more kids behind. So I never had a bed to myself till I left home. And in the other bedroom were my parents. And then we had a kitchen with a dining room table and a little living room right next to our family sawmill. My grandfather was the general superintendent of a sawmill company. My father was running one of those mills. My older brother worked in the sawmill. My uncles worked in the sawmill. I was about 6 when my dad looked at me and he said, Barry, you're left-handed. You can't work in the sawmill. You'll have to do something else like teach. And he sort of set me on that path. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to use speaking and my voice to help other people. And that's really what motivated me from the very beginning. I wanted to be in a helping situation. Now, I was blessed in high school, and then when I did go to college and completed college, and I've been involved in 3 companies before I started my own, and I've risen to president of all 3 of them, and I'm grateful for that. But in 1994, when I made the decision I was going to do this to the exclusion of everything else, I did not want to build a big firm. I wanted to be the one doing the work. I enjoy the hands-on work with a client, with a company. I was sitting in the boardroom of one of my long-term clients. They've been a client for over 23 years. I was sitting in their boardroom just before COVID hit in February. And I looked around the room and I realized I had seniority in the room. I'm on the 3rd owner of that company. And every new owner that's bought the company said, we want your contract to continue. So sometimes a VP or a manager had been held over. But I sat there and realized I'm the only person in this room who was here 23 years ago, and I'm on contract. I'm not an employee. That's rewarding to me. It's been rewarding to me to invest my time. So as a little boy, I knew I can't do anything with my hands. I'm just not talented with my hands. My family, all my family could build furniture and houses. I just can't. So I poured myself into words. This is my happy place you're sitting in. This has been my place where I come every day for 37 years. This is my study in my home. And here is where, on that chair back there is where I planned, wasn't that chair, it was another chair, but it sat there, where I planned to open my business in 1994. Since March 1st, I've sat in that chair and made new plans. I've cried, I've prayed, and I've cried again to try to make things get to where they need to be. But this is my workshop here with my books and myself, where I can read And that's what I've always wanted to do. And I've been blessed, very blessed, to be able to do that and earn a living.
So in other words, that's where the famous phrase, if you can't work at the sawmill, then you teach.
Yeah. Well, and here's a keynote I give, and I don't give it often because people they don't fully understand it. The keynote is a question: what's your left hand?
Oh, wow.
Had I been right-handed, I would be in a sawmill in the mountains of Western North Carolina, and at noon today we would shut the saws down. So we all have something that we think is a disability. We think it's something that holds us back, when in reality, that left hand may be the platform that propels us to something we could never have imagined. So the keynote is, what's your left hand? What is it that you think is holding you back? It may be the very thing that propels you forward.
And your cognitive competency exercise, I mean, that can tell us really the essence of who we are for the client. And
Yes.
then we can decide to give a talk if we want, do a workshop, or even do consulting like you do, or maybe open ourselves to listen enough to the client that we could do all three.
Exactly right. When I was growing up there, my grandmother lived not far from us. She had a 50-acre farm in Lake Toxaway, North Carolina. Never had indoor plumbing, never had indoor electric, never had a driver's license, a truck, a tractor. She farmed with the team. She was a widow for 25 years. She had a profound impact on me. This statement is not original with her because she had shared it with my dad. My dad had shared it with me. Barry, you won't worry so much what people think about you if you realize how little they ever think about you. I am grateful for every client that I have. But God forbid, if something happens to me this afternoon, I'll be replaced within a week. And so I realize when I'm sitting with that client or I'm standing on that platform, my value has little to do with my past or my titles or being a CPAE. It has everything to do with what value can I deliver to that audience? How can I help them get from where they are to where they want to get to? And think about that. If you'll just permit me one thought. Prior to COVID, we have 2,600 NSA members. Prior to COVID, on any given week, 1,000 of our members are up in front of an audience. Conservatively, that's 50,000 people a week, and it's probably more like 100,000. 50,000 people a week hearing our colleagues help them become better leaders, better coaches, better salespeople, better parents, better spouses, learn how to take care of themselves better, name all the topics. Is there any other association in the world where all of us together every week are influencing that many people to help them improve their lives? It's what makes NSA so very special. And as you're looking at this screen, NSA is not at our headquarters in Phoenix, and NSA is not at the boardroom level with my colleagues. NSA is not on a stage at Influence. It's right here. It's the local chapter and speaker school of all places. This is the heartbeat of NSA. Your colleagues here sharing with each other. This is what makes our association so unique in helping people. And it's what really motivates me to be part of it.
I noticed that when Amy put her hand up, a fraction of a second later, Michael put his hand up. Michael, do you still want to do a cognitive?
Michael, we'll do yours.
Take yourself off mute. There we go.
Yeah, it takes time.
All right, Michael, if I can ask you, may I ask you the questions?
Surely, please.
I suppose I should begin by asking you what your doctorate's in so I don't mess up here.
I have a PhD in resource economics.
Excellent. If it was applied psychology, I'm in trouble, but it's good. Resource economics is a great place. So, Michael, what is the topic you speak on?
I speak on creativity.
How do you mean that, Michael?
Basically speaking, people have a tendency to focus in one point and one way to approach a problem, and they get tracked in. I teach them to think in ways which are a different approach, by analogy, by shifting their focus.
Can you give me an example of that, of how you helped somebody shift their focus?
Yeah, certainly. Let me actually use my father as a wonderful example. My father, who is the inventor of the barcode. And basically speaking, they were having a problem that they were looking for railroad cars, and they had colored strips, and the crayon would go past the reader, and it was too fast. And they kept trying to accelerate the speed at which the readers worked. They used faster computers, they used different algorithms, everything else, and the thing still blurred. And they were losing $1 million contract. My father happened to walk in to the guy who was working on it at lunchtime, asked what was going on, was told, he said, here's your solution.
Wow.
Take the strips and read them at your own pace. And that's all it took.
Now, do companies really need that today? Why is that valuable to help them look at things from a different perspective? Why is that valuable?
People all the time are looking at technical problems. They're looking at sales problems. They're looking at management problems. And they're looking from their own limited tracked perspectives. Mm-hmm. And if they learn to change the focus, they'll find solutions easily. They'll make more money. They'll solve technical problems.
All right, stop right there. So Michael's cognitive competency, I'm going to show your team how to look at problems differently so they solve problems quicker and make more money as a result. And in fact, I happen to have in my pocket, this is a common barcode, isn't it? Well, I grew up in the man's household who created this. I spent my life seeing how powerful creativity is. I think I can help you. So there's your cognitive competency. It's helping them look at problems in a different way so that they can be innovative and make more money. And an example in my personal life is my father, who, by the way, happened to be the one who first focused on creating a barcode. So creativity is a wonderful topic, but it's a commodity. If you go to the eSpeaker website or eSpeaker site, there are hundreds of speakers on creativity. Not a lot of speakers who speak on, I'm going to help you look at a problem in a different way that's more creative and will help you quicker solve a problem to make more money. For example, what my father did. And I think that's an advantage. I hope that helps, Michael.
It does.
Ari, you speak, you get a lot of good information from asking good questions. I'm just interested in your thoughts on, we do a lot of topic here on sales and marketing, obviously. But when a speaker gets onto a potential client, they tend to come up with a kind of elevator pitch, which drives me crazy. Mm-hmm. But is it more important that the speaker, when they're trying to pitch their business, actually asks good questions rather than just spouting on and on? Are your thoughts on that?
So Connor, could you and I role play that? Would you mind? It'll be safe, I promise. I'll make you look good.
I knew I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you should have.
Yeah.
So Connor, in order for us to do this, I want you to have a business in mind. Maybe it's a business you've run in the past, but just give me the kind of business you're going to be answering my questions from. Tell me what the business is.
I'm the business. So are you pitching me?
I'm pitching you, and tell me what your business is.
Right. Let's say we're a healthcare organization.
Okay. Connor, thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak with you. Connor, I can, in all honesty, tell you that I'm the right fit for your audience, for your employees, for your leaders. But if we could talk for a few minutes, yep. we'll both know whether or not I'm a fit. Is that fair enough?
That's fine. Yeah.
So Connor, when you think about your leadership team, what's the biggest problem that you're facing with your leadership team right now?
I think they're all incredibly stressed out over this COVID situation and worrying when it's going to end.
How do you mean that, Connor?
Basically, you know the situation we're all in, and I think people are just fatigued. They're worrying whether they're pushing their people too hard, and they're worrying about their own health and the family dynamic as well.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of one of those leaders that you're particularly concerned about? Don't have to tell me their name, but just how are they demonstrating that fatigue in the workplace?
Yeah, well, one of our VPs actually is trying to homeschool her kids as well at the moment, and it's just causing so much angst. You can see the way it's affecting her performance. She knows it's affecting her performance, and we're trying to give her leeway, but it is a challenge. If
we stay in this for another 6 to 9 months and she has to continue doing that, is there any downside, or are you confident she's going to be able to manage both and it won't really hurt the company?
I'm not confident, Barry. I think she's an excellent executive, but I think she's just going to flame out.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Connor, what your team needs is to know how to manage the personal stress that the pandemic's causing, and at the same time, know how to manage their business or professional stress. And then more importantly, be responsible for creating their own balance. Is that sort of what you're thinking?
That's actually on point. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah.
Now, then we're going to stop for a moment, and I'll explain it in a minute. At this point, oftentimes the buyer will say to me, well, Barry, what does all of this cost? So Connor, we're going to come back into the role play now. And Connor is going to say, well, Barry, what would it cost for you to help me do that? Watch what happens. So Connor, I think what you're asking is helping your leadership team manage their stress personally at home with kids, managing their stress on the job, and then being able to discern between the two so that you don't lose productivity on the job. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah, makes sense.
Now you're going to ask me the question about cost.
Okay, Barry, we are pretty well under revenue issues at the moment. So what would this cost me?
You mean, what would it cost if your team doesn't know how to manage their stress and the failure of productivity at work continues? In all honesty, Connor, if I can't help you help your team handle the stress better, I can't be cheap enough to be worth anything. However, if I'm able to help your team handle that and they become more productive and we make it through to this summer and your company stays out in front, then my fee is really irrelevant, isn't it? And that's exactly the language I use, because it's not my fee that matters. It's what it's going to cost my client. And so you probably recognize those questions, didn't you? I use those questions raising my two sons, those two boys that I talked about in the baseball. The older one is now, he's just finished a term as vice mayor of our city. He's running for mayor. He's the managing partner of our firm. My younger son is a world-class musician. He's a media personality in Washington, D.C. From the time they were about 10 years of age on, they come to me with a problem. And I will say, can you give me an example of that? Or how do you mean that? And my older son was in college. And he called me on the phone with a problem. And before I could say a word, he said, I know. How do I mean it? I'm going to tell you how I mean it. And I said to him, I said, bingo. I want you to think that way when I'm not around. When I'm dead, I want you to always be asking yourself those 4 questions, because there's a higher likelihood you're going to succeed if you do that. So I asked Connor as my prospect, what's the problem? How do you mean that? Give me an example. What's the cost? And he's just told me what the cost is. And usually at some point when I'm digging deep with the pain, the client or the prospect will say, well, Barry, how much does that cost? And I look right at them and say, you mean, how much will it cost if the problem continues, et cetera? And then they'll sometimes smile and say, well, that's cute. And I'll say, but isn't that the only cost that matters? Because if I can't help you solve that, I can't be cheap enough to be worth your time. However, if I am able to help you solve that, then my fee really becomes irrelevant, doesn't it? So it's a point of helping the client recognize you have one purpose. From the platform or training or coaching, you have one purpose. I'm going to help you solve your problem, or I'm going to help you achieve that opportunity. That's when the client sees us as standing side by side with them, and we're of value to them. I hope that, Connor, thanks for playing along with me, and I hope that helps.
Oh, it's brilliant. Thank you. And for the group, by the way, this will be on recording, and I'll highlight the actual section as well where Barry is giving these examples. It's brilliant. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
I think, this is also an example, Barry, isn't it, of really how you talk to clients, how you give quote speeches on Zoom, how you talk in a boardroom. You're really not there to dump information on them. You're there to kind of do this in terms of information that they're going to give you.
Exactly right. I made that mistake early on. I don't think I've made it in a while, but I used to make it pretty frequently, where I thought they really needed to know who I was and everything I'd done and all that I'd accomplished and all the books I'd written. That's irrelevant to them. It's totally irrelevant to them. They want me to help them solve a problem or achieve an opportunity. I've got to find the problem or find the opportunity, and then I've got to do my work to know how to help them to get there. But if you can do that, we did a brand study 5 years ago. We reached out to all the associations that had hired me, corporate clients, and we wanted to know, why do they hire me over and over? Now, I was surprised at the answer, but I was pleased. The common answer was this: we know we're going to have a problem this year. We want Barry to be in the problem with us. So that changed our approach to how we presented ourselves, and it made a difference. Now, that won't work for everybody, but knowing what your client values in you is absolutely critical.
I mentioned to everybody earlier, David Brooks had a column in the New York Times yesterday that ended with, humans need to be heard before they will listen.
And, what an example. And by the way, if none of you are reading David Brooks, you need to read his latest work. What a metamorphosis he's been through, that is a great example to all of us of getting more in touch with not only ourselves, but our connection personally and our professional connections.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the skills that I see you using over and over with everybody is listening. I mean, you sound like you are a very trained, experienced, focused listener. You're paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more question. Then I'd like 2 or 3 of you to ask him a question. This is Larry King style, so you get to ask questions as well. The question I've got is, I suppose I should have checked this out before I'm asking this, so I don't mean to embarrass you, but are you still married to that woman that said we have to talk in the 90s?
Yes, we celebrated the 45th anniversary of our first date a week ago today. So yes, we've been married 44 years.
How do you account for it from your point of view, building a business, figuring out how to pivot back then on the ball field? How do you account for having a successful marriage in a business that is not many times ripe with successful marriages?
Well, that's a great question, Larry.
Oh yeah,
Larry,
right.
yes.
So my wife's name is Janice, and here's how Janice answers the question. People will say, how long have you been married? She'll say, well, we've been married 44 years, but we've been together 25 because I've traveled so much. But here's a candid answer to it. We've had our struggles, as every couple does, and I really encourage you, if you're married, you want to keep working at it. It's work. I shared that with my sons. Knowing how to disagree is important. But we found something in common that's helped us. So if you'll permit me, since you asked me the question, I'll share the story. My wife, almost 30 years ago, founded an organization. You can find it online. It's called Birth Behind Bars. She was a midwife, a doula, a childbirth educator. She began this nonprofit organization working with pregnant homeless girls, which I was amazed how many they were. Her challenge to me was, Barry, take a portion of every speech you get paid for, every consulting contract, and let's use that to support a nonprofit to reach these women. There are 12,000 pregnant inmates in jails and prisons around North America on any given day. She developed a program. Prior to her program, for example, in a county jail, when it came time for a pregnant inmate to deliver, she's taken to an unknown hospital. It's a security risk. She's shackled to a bed, and an unknown male guard stands in the room and watches her have a baby. It's horrific. Janice developed a program where ahead of time, at no expense to the jail, it's a nonprofit. My firm and my work supports it, and we now have clients who do. So her team goes in ahead of time and does prenatal childbirth education, gets them ready for birth. When they go in to have the baby, a trained doula or even midwife will go with them. The guard's outside the door and the woman's not shackled. And it significantly reduces the medical intervention, and it improves bonding, gives that child who's innocent. If there are 12,000 pregnant inmates in jail right now or prison, there are 12,000 innocent babies that haven't done anything wrong. This helps that woman have a better chance. The Chicken Soup for the Soul books have featured her a couple of times with these stories. So that gave us something beyond just my business and beyond our sons that we could have in common. So I encourage you, find a way to do something in common that you both have a passion for. You may not be doing it equally, but I'm not going into jails. I'm not going into those prisons. She helped a prison in West Virginia start a program several years ago where these are hardcore criminals that are coming into maximum security. They're going to spend 10 years if they don't get probation or if they don't get parole. And she developed a program where if they come in and qualify and have their baby in prison, they keep their baby in their cell for 2 years. The lack of anything to do is a real problem. Idleness is a problem in prison. And these women, for the first time, learned how to bond with this baby, to bond with another person. So Janice would every year go into prison. And I teased her when she went in the first time to this prison in West Virginia. I said, you got to let me put that on Facebook. Where I come from in the mountains, that's considered a gated community. We're moving up if you can get in there. And she wouldn't let me do any of that. So find something in common that you both have a passion for and you both can contribute to, because the children won't be enough. They'll grow up and they'll have independent lives. That's been what's worked for us. And at the same time, we work at it. We realize that there's no guarantee in a marriage and you have to work at it.
Yeah, thank you. Questions? This is your shot with talking to Barry. You can ask him anything you want, personal or professional. Amy.
Barry, thank you so much for your coaching. What is one book that you keep reading? I know besides Bible.
So Amy, the book that I do read, I'm going to bring it right up. Hold on a second. And you saw that I'm wearing sweatpants instead of dress pants. So this is the book. Now, this isn't for everybody. I'm going to show you how you'll find yours. This is David Livingston's biography by Dr. Blacky. Most people know David Livingston as a missionary or a doctor who went to Africa. He also was a geographer. He was the one who drew the maps that opened up Africa. This book is the only book published that actually quotes his journals, the journals he would write. And it's the most inspiring book I've ever read about a leader. I started reading it about maybe 40 years ago. I can't remember now. I've given away hundreds, and it's probably my copy. When I finish reading it, I start over, because Livingston is a wonderful example of selflessness and at the same time committed to what he was doing. What he was primarily doing was building maps of Africa so that the missionaries and the doctors and explorers that came behind him would find those. But he did something else. When he got to Africa, he found that the missionaries were living separate from the Afrikaners, from the colored, the people of color who dominated Africa. And that troubled him. Most historians today credit Livingston with being the one whose voice Wilberforce heard, who eventually that voice found its way into politics in the United States. Livingston is buried in the floor of Westminster Abbey. If you've ever been to Westminster Abbey, all the kings and queens are buried around the wall. There's one grave in the floor, and it's his. And one of the first times I was in London, I had to see that grave. And I'm gonna I'll paraphrase it, but here lies the body of one who fought this horrible scourge of slavery. And so he's an example of someone. He never went to the United States. He never personally spent any time of any significance with any Americans, but he was able to build a work that transformed a continent, and more importantly, I think, impacted the world. So this is the one I read over and over. And every time I read it, I find something in it that I didn't see before. He faced horrible problems. When he died, he was, one last quick story. He's traveling with the Portuguese army, and it's him and 3 or 4 natives who were his assistants and associates. No one had heard from him for about a year. Now, you might remember, if you saw the movie, the great phrase, Dr. Livingston, I presume. That was when Stanley, the journalist, was trying to find Livingston. So the Portuguese general told Livingston that evening, he said, "We've been ordered by the king to turn back. So tomorrow morning at sunrise, we'll head to the coast." Sunrise came, and the Portuguese army's packing up their mules and preparing to go. He looks over at Livingston's tent, and he and his 3 aides are packing up their mule, but they're headed out. And the leader of the Portuguese army went to him and he said, "The king has ordered us to turn back." And it was the last words we know of that Livingston said to anyone other than these natives. He said, "Your king ordered you to turn back, not mine." And within a week or two, he would die on his knees in his tent. Now, those 3 Afrikaners who were with him, they intently knew, we've got to get his body back to England. However, had they tried to carry a dead body for weeks over the African landscape to the coast, out of superstition, they would have been slaughtered. So they took Livingston's body and curved it up onto a pole and wrapped it so it looked like an animal they had killed and they were carrying out for food. And they carried that body through villages, through dusty roads, till they got to the coast. They were able to deliver the body to a trading ship going back to England. When it got to England, the Royal Geographic Society identified Livingston because he had been attacked by a lion decades earlier and had a broken shoulder that hadn't mended. And in the autopsy, that's how they identified him. Wow. Livingston gave of himself sacrificially, like probably no other leader I'm aware of. So anyway, that's the book I read. And you find yours. Find the biography for you that works for you. Now, I'll give you another crazy one that I think will help us as speakers. And you're so kind to let me rattle on here. We call ourselves entrepreneurs, and I respect that, but I don't really think I work with entrepreneurs. They take every dime they can, get every dime they can from their family, rob their kids' savings accounts, put all that money together, build a business or a product or a barcode strategy, and they sell it, and then they go do it again. That's an entrepreneur. We're more like artists. I think we're more like country music artists. You want to learn how to create intellectual property in 2 minutes and 45 seconds? Just listen to Tammy Wynette or George Jones. Those things are amazing. So I'm going to recommend a biography to you. The title of the biography is this. It's a long story written by Willie Nelson. It's a long story written by Willie Nelson, because that's what we do. We create some intellectual property. We call it a speech. We call it a book. We call it a training. And we take it out there and we deliver it. And when people kind of get tired of that, we come back into our study and we write some more intellectual property as a book or as a training or as a pamphlet or as a video or a podcast. And we go back out there and distribute it. So Willie Nelson, his life story of creating intellectual product, I think would be helpful to you.
Thank you.
Here.
Now you're embarrassed. Now you're embarrassed. You're embarrassed that I'm your chairman after I've shared those two stories with you.
Who wrote the Livingston book?
It's written by W. Garden, Garden, Blacky, Blickie. It's not published anymore. It may have been republished, but hopefully you can find a used copy. If you're interested in that kind of biography, but find the biography that fits for you, whatever one fits for you, and let it be an inspiration to you.
Questions? We got time for a couple more questions.
Okay.
I've got a question, man. Go ahead. I've got a question for you. Go ahead, Connor.
Well, I was looking at your website, Barry. You've got some community ideas on it as well. Are you pushing those aggressively, or is it a good way for people to market themselves?
How do you mean that? When you say
you've got a number of different, let me dig it out here. Community ideas is what you're talking about. You've got podcasts, you've got 3-minute videos, etc., that kind of thing.
So here's how I do with my intellectual property. I've got about 400 podcasts that are 7 minutes long that deal with leadership. I've got about 50 videos. I don't release those publicly. When that client hires me to speak, Barry, we want you to speak at our conference. I say, well, I would like to give your audience an opportunity to get to know me. So for 30 days before I speak and 30 days after I speak, I'm going to give you a password they can use. They can go in and watch my videos. They can go in and listen to the podcast, and it'll help them decide ahead of time whether or not I can help them. So I use it as a marketing tool for more business. And almost to that exception, the association will say, how can we have access to those for an entire year? Now, when I sign a corporate consulting contract, I make it available to them as well. So the community groups there, I have now some of those are public. There are a couple of those on that page. There are a couple of those that are public, but the podcast, if someone clicks on that and says, Barry, I want to start getting your podcast, then that's a lead for us that we work with them. So yes, we do produce some things for the public. I have a newsletter called, I call it a newsletter. It's an e-zine. It comes out every Monday called Next. I spend about an hour a day inside McKinsey, the large consulting firm, reading all their latest reports, and I try to discern that for my audiences so they don't have to do that. So I'm constantly trying to create product that I can share with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. Yes, go ahead, Barbara.
Well, I wanted to know what your topic is.
So
how do you answer that question?
So typically when I'm hired, they're hiring me to speak on leadership in a private or family or closely held business. That's what they hire me for. What I say to them, in fact, let's role play it. So Barbara, you're an association meeting planner. We're talking, and I want you to say first off, well, Barry, we'd like to hire you for our keynote speaker. So go ahead, Barbara.
Barry, we'd like to hire you as our keynote speaker.
Barbara, I'm flattered and honored. I would love to be able to do that. Could I make one request? I want to make sure that I deliver what your audience needs. Would it be possible for you to connect me with 3 or 4 of your key leaders so that I can have a conversation with them? And then Barbara, I'd like to come back to you within a week and share with you the outline of my presentation, because every presentation I prepare is only for that audience. Would that be okay, Barbara?
Sounds great.
And then when you look at that, if it's not the right thing, you can tell me what it needs to be. Now, let me stop and explain what I just did. I really don't need to do that. I've done this long enough and in front of enough people, I could probably guess and I would know what it is. But if you went to the emergency room this afternoon and your leg was hurting and swollen, And the emergency room doctor came in and said, don't need any x-rays. I've seen 1,000 of these. You need a plate, you need surgery. We're scheduling it now. Well, wait a minute, doc. Can you make sure? So I need the audience to believe before I ever get there that I've got the right answer. So when I'm speaking to those 5 people, here's my purpose. I want those 5 people to tell 5 more. You know, that guy that's going to speak to us, I talked to him. It's not going to be too bad. He wasn't that arrogant. He's not like the last guy we had. And so I'm salting the audience so that when I stand up to speak, it's theirs. And the more they believe it's theirs and not mine. Now, I really do create a custom presentation for every audience. Now, I've got a database with about 400 stories and about 300 points. We can pull all that together quickly. I'm not writing original material, but I'm taking what I have and putting it together in a way that it's original for them. Does that make sense? So I'm usually hired because they've read something I've written on leadership or generational transition, but I don't go with that. I early on, probably 94 to 2000, I made the mistake of standing up on the stage and realized what I'm talking about was of no value. And I said, I'll never do that again. That's an embarrassing situation. So I really spend a lot of time trying to understand exactly what it is they need.
Barry, you had a question, you said.
What could NSA nationally do better for you as members of the Speakers School, as key parts of our future? What's one thing we could do better to help you? Yes. Amy?
Getting more gigs, my colleagues and myself included.
You know, Amy, that's something historically that NSA has said we don't do that, but we're changing our mind about that because we're in a different world now. And I do believe there's a way, when we're exploring it right now. You're probably not going to hear anything about it before late spring, but we're exploring a way that someone as a member could step up and we could find a way that we could help create more awareness within a market for what a member does. So we're looking, can we partner better with these speakers? Can we partner better with the bureaus? Everybody's got a different business model, but one thing that COVID has done, it's brought all of us collectively to the same place. So that's a good point, Amy, and we're working on that. Thank you for that. Encourages me that you'd want that.
Thank you.
Yes, Alicia.
Yeah, thank you for all of this. This has been incredibly helpful. There were 2 things that come to mind for me. One is the manual that we have from the National Speakers Association. It's good, but it's 8 years old and it shows. And it would be really nice to have an updated version of the manual. The other thing is that—
Can we stop there for a moment? I'm embarrassed that that's true, and it's true. Here's one thing we're doing differently about that. I don't even know if Kevin knows this yet, but this week, the decision was made that we're going to connect all of our speaker school deans around the country. Carolyn Quinton, who is the dean of NSA Central Florida, been a friend of mine for 20 years, she's going to host that. And we're hoping within a week or 2, we'll have all the deans connected. And what you just said is one of the top things we have to do. First of all, the fact that you even said manual. I mean, you know, think about that for a moment. We have to have a way that it's digital, that it's current, and there's an effort underway to do that. And you've reinforced that, Alicia. Now you had a follow-up question.
Sure, thank you. The other thing was the digital vault on the website. I keep going there thinking, I might want something there, but I don't know. And that price point is high. Am I really going to get the value from that vault?
That's a great question. And it exemplifies that we've done a poor job of marketing. So let me share with you. That vault is right now the largest collection of curated material in the speaking business in the world. We've spent 2 years putting it together. I'm going to give you an example. Russ Riddle, that you might know, is a member. He's a member of the national board. He's our secretary. He's out of the North Texas chapter. Russ is an attorney. He is a patent attorney. If you know Thomas the Tank, or if you know Barney the Dinosaur, those are all brands that he was responsible for protecting those brands. Russ has put into the vault every contract, every agreement, every licensing template you will ever need.
Okay.
So for one price point for the year, you don't need to call an attorney. They're all there. That's just one example. So we're working on how we can better demonstrate to you the value. But I say to you, from my perspective, it's the most highly valued intellectual property for the speaking business. And here's another point. We're adding to it every week. We have people curating material. New material is going in every week. So I would encourage you to take the risk. Do it once for a year. And if you don't get value, let me know. We'll figure out why didn't you get value, because I'm confident the value is there. But it's an honest question, and thank you for bringing it up.
I'm wondering what it would cost if I don't do it, so.
Good point. Very good point. And
Lynn?
I'll be candid with you. We're looking at a way to roll it into membership. If you look at all the professional associations, ATD, MPI, other professional associations, we're on the lower scale of what we in 20 years, we've only raised our dues twice. And we have to operate in the black as an association. We want to do two things. We want to help you get better at the craft of speaking, and we want you to build a better speaking, training, coaching, consulting business. That's our goal. And we know we have to have a digital presence to do that, but it's not inexpensive. We have to pay for it to be hosted, developed. So we're working on that, and I encourage you to give it a chance. And I think Lynn had a question.
Yep.
Yeah, when it comes to NSA, what I've experienced is that there's a lot of people who are giving great information, but they're already successful. They are the top of the line, and what they're saying is not resonating with me, or I'm not at that point. I'm also not at the bottom. I'm also not just a beginner. I'm falling right in the middle of speaking. I haven't made it into the let me just use I'm actually an edutainment type speaker, so I'm not a Mike Rayburn or a Dan Thurman, but yet I'm not a beginner. And I just find that middle area there is I don't get a lot of value because of that. It's either very general information, or it's things that I'm not going to be able to connect with some of that information that they've been doing. Well, this is what a $30,000 speaker does. Well, I'm not a $30,000 speaker yet.
Right. So Lynn, give me an example. This is very helpful. Thank you for bringing that up. And by the way, my email is barry@barrybanther.com. It's not hard. barry@barrybanther.com. You think of something tonight you should have told me, please send me an email. Now, at 4:30 this afternoon, I won't be available because the greatest college football team of all time is on the field. And you may chuckle about the Alabama Crimson Tide, but do you realize that for the last 13 years, at some time during every season, they're number one, and today's that day. We play a game this afternoon, just teasing. Send me an email and say, Barry, I thought about this. This is what I need. So Lynn, what's one thing that you think you need where you are now, and you're in that sweet spot that we want to serve? What's something you need we're not giving you? A topic, an idea? Can you help me?
I almost go back to Amy's piece of I've reached out individually to clients, associations, things like that. I've begin to tap into bureaus just a little bit, right? So I've got 3 bureaus that have been working with me, but not a lot. And I don't know how to take it all to the next level.
So let me ask you a question, and I can't guarantee this, but I need to know all of you can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. If we had right now a virtual program that you could come to for 2 hours a week for 5 weeks or 6 weeks, and we really pinpointed how do you sell and market yourself now, but also when we get through this, when you're in that developing level, would that be helpful to you? And we deliberately develop it, Lynn, so that it's not for the $30,000 speaker and it's not for the beginning speaker, but how do you better tap associations? That's a big topic. And there are some simple things, but there are other complex things. Bureaus is a big topic. I do not work with bureaus. I have many bureau friends. I attend the International Association of Speaker Bureaus, but my business has a long tail. I may give a presentation for 10 apples, but that client will pay me 1,000 apples over 10 years. So I'm not a good candidate for them because I have so much spinoff business. So if we had a way that we said, look, we need to do a program for people that are not at the beginning, they're not at $30,000, but they really need to know how can they get more business now. Several of you said they were interested. Lynn, you didn't seem as though that would interest you.
I'm hesitant because I've sat in on so many presentations over the last 4 years, and spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money. And I'm not feeling it. It's not coming my way. To be honest with you, what you just did now, I've probably gotten more value out of that than in the last hour than I maybe have had in years.
Well, I'm glad it helped. So this may help everybody, and I'll run over by just a minute or two. I promise not too long. So Lynn, what is your current marketing strategy? How are you marketing yourself in edutainment right now during this environment?
I do right now in this environment, nothing's happening for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting any bookings. They are not in the space of being interested in what I do. I do where I do content with music throughout the entire thing, and then I turn into Lady Gaga at the end. As a matter of fact, Russ Riddle helped me with the
what kind of content?
Stepping out of your comfort zone is
so here's what I would do, and it won't hurt my feelings if you think about this and say Barry needed to sleep longer. That was a horrible idea. Are you familiar with Cameo? Do you know what Cameo is?
Mm-mm.
Cameo artist and I was I was asked to be a consultant on this. I turned it down because it just didn't fit what I needed to be doing. For example, my wife has just undergone a spinal cord stimulus implant. She's had spinal surgery. She spent the last year mostly on her back. She still did her work from her computer. She couldn't go to prison, couldn't go to jail, but she could train her other people and certify them. Well, she's watched every episode of The Waltons that you can imagine, every episode. So she was about to undergo her next surgery, and I was looking for a way to encourage her. So I went into Cameo, and they had the gentleman that played John Boy, Richard Thomas. So I paid a fee, a very small fee. I paid a fee for Richard Thomas to tape a 3-minute message to my wife. 2 days later, she gets an email. Hi, Janice. It's John Boy. Richard. Barry tells me you're facing surgery. And she's crying watching this. And he says, look, he's told me about your work in prisons and jails. Janice, you're an American hero. And now I want you to be something else. I'm making you an honorary Walton. Janice Walton. She can't stop crying. And then he says, well, Janice, I need to go. So let me say goodbye this way. Good night, Mary Ellen. Good night, Janice. Good night, Barry. She plays it over and over. Now, here's my point. Lynn, your message is needed now more than it was when you're on stage. I would reach out to a business and say, look, you've got people that need encouragement. I'm willing to do this as an example. Give me 5 people on a Zoom screen and I will do my Lady Gaga. I'll do my whole edutainment for them to encourage them. Just those 5 people. Let's see how it works. If it were me, I would get maybe 15 people, your friends. I would do 30 minutes like that, record it, and I would use that as a marketing tool to businesses, associations. Do you need people that need to smile, that need to be encouraged? That's what I do. Can't get on the stage, take a look at what I did on Zoom or take a look at what I did on Teams. Your message is needed. You just have to find a different audience. Mm-hmm. And they're not booking you to do 500 people virtually, no, but I bet you could get some business doing 20, 30 leadership groups at a time. Or even reach out to a nonprofit and volunteer to do it so that you can record it. And then you've got something to use as a lead when you're marketing yourself.
So we have to close. Thank you very much, Barry. We want to give Barry a parting gift. Would you tell him what you liked, learned, or appreciated? We'll do this in 2 minutes. What did you like, learn, or appreciate? First one to go is best.
I love the competency. That's just brilliant. I'm going to dial down and look at that for myself. And just I mean, you were totally brilliant in everything, but
Thank you.
Monkeys.
Thank you very
Anybody
much.
else?
I have to say that one, I absolutely love your warm, authentic, and loving personality.
Thank you, Don.
Absolutely. And two, this closing piece around cost and really speaking to not worried about the money, but more so worried about the cost of the problem.
Right.
Somebody else?
This is going to sound like I'm denigrating the first and fourth, but the second and third questions you asked really helped put things in proper perspective.
Yeah. It's always a different of the four. That's a very good comment. Thank you.
Somebody else?
I just
Yeah.
love your clarity. Like you speak so, concise and clear. And I love the four questions are just brilliant. And I just love how you just, you've taken these four questions and you use them, you just adapt them to whatever the situation is. I just think that's so brilliant. So thank you for
Thank you,
so much
Barbara.
for sharing it.
Thank you very much.
Amy?
Thank you so much for your time and learned a ton with you. For 20 years of an NSA member, this is the first time to be able to spend time with a, well, of course, you are the first chairman now, someone of your status to really listen and talk to us. Thank you.
Barry, I want to, go ahead, Alicia.
I just wanted to say, I second all of those things, but I also want to add the whole pre-virtual presentation, post-virtual, and making it an experience is just brilliant. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Kevin, if I could ask, if you don't mind, could you take a screenshot and send it to me so that I can encourage other speaker schools that this is a good thing? Could you do that for me?
I don't know how to do it. Anybody here know how to do it?
I can do it.
Amy, if you could do it and just send it to Barry, and send it to Barry@barrybanther.com.